The Holocaust did not emerge from chaos. It was, in the precise and disturbing sense of the word, administered. 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were identified, registered, classified, located, transported, and killed, with a degree of bureaucratic order that required not merely political will, but technological infrastructure. Historians have long examined the ideological, military, and logistical dimensions of that infrastructure. Far less attention has been paid to its informational dimension, to the question of how the Nazi state came to know with such precision who its victims were, where they lived, and what they owned. This documentary examines one answer to that question: the role of punch card technology, developed and supplied by the International Business Machines Corporation, IBM, in enabling the systematic persecution of European Jews between 1933 and 1945. The evidence is drawn primarily from Edwin Black's landmark 2001 investigation, IBM and the Holocaust, based on more than 20,000 documents gathered across archives in multiple countries.
To understand the role IBM played in the Third Reich, one must first understand the technology itself, what punch cards were, what they could do, and why they represented such a dramatic leap in information processing capacity. Hermann Hollerith, a German-American engineer, invented the punch card system in the 1880s as a solution to the United States Census Bureau's data bottleneck. The 1880 census had taken nearly 8 years to process manually. With population growth accelerating, the Bureau faced the prospect that future census results might be obsolete by the time they were published. Hollerith's solution was based on a simple but powerful principle. Information could be encoded not as text, but as the physical presence or absence of a hole at a specific location on a rectangular card. Technical detail: punch card architecture. A standard IBM punch card measured 7.375 by 3.25 inches, printed on paper of precisely controlled thickness and humidity resistance. The card was divided into 80 vertical columns and 12 horizontal rows, yielding 960 potential punching positions. Each column typically encoded a single character or categorical value. The combination of punched holes across multiple columns encoded a complete record: a person's name, age, sex, nationality, religion, occupation, property holdings, and racial classification, all on a single piece of cardstock. Cards were read by tabulating machines that passed an electrical current through each position. Where a hole had been punched, the circuit closed. Where it had not, the circuit remained open. The machine could distinguish between these states at high speed, sorting and counting records according to any punched field. The Hollerith tabulator reduced the processing time for the 1890 United States Census from an estimated 10 years to under 18 months. The implications were immediately apparent. Any institution that needed to manage large populations of data, governments, railways, armies, insurance companies, stood to benefit enormously. Hollerith commercialized his invention and eventually founded the company that, through a series of mergers, became IBM in 1924. IBM refined the technology continuously over the following decades, increasing card capacity, processing speed, and the sophistication of the cross-referencing operations the machines could perform. By the 1930s, an operator with an IBM system could perform what would today be called a database query, selecting all records that matched multiple simultaneous criteria in a matter of minutes. Without that technology, the same task performed manually might require weeks or months of clerical labor.
IBM had operated in Germany since 1910 through a wholly owned subsidiary known as the Deutsche Hollerith Maschinen Gesellschaft, the DEHOMAG. The subsidiary manufactured, leased, and serviced the full range of IBM's tabulating equipment within the German market. IBM's business model was deliberately structured to maximize dependency. Its machines were not sold outright. They were leased, with service contracts that required regular visits by IBM-trained technicians. The punch cards themselves, manufactured to exacting tolerances that the machines required to function reliably, were proprietary and could be obtained from no other supplier. A client who adopted IBM's system became in effect permanently dependent on IBM for its continuation. In 1933, the year Adolf Hitler was appointed chancellor, DEHOMAG was commissioned to conduct the first major census of the Nazi era. The census was not merely demographic, it was, from its inception, an instrument of racial identification. The 1933 German census punch cards were custom configured to capture data fields of particular relevance to the Nazi regime's racial classification program. Beyond standard demographic categories, the cards encoded fields for religious affiliation, distinguishing Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish respondents, as well as fields for the nationalities and religious affiliations of the respondents' parents and grandparents. This last feature was critical. Under the racial laws that would be codified in the 1935 Nuremberg laws, Jewish identity was defined not by personal belief or practice, but by ancestry, specifically by the number of Jewish grandparents a person had. A person with 2 Jewish grandparents was classified as a Mischling, a person of mixed race. A person with 3 or 4 was classified as fully Jewish. The punch card system allowed this 3-generational genealogical query to be executed automatically at population scale in a fraction of the time it would have taken through manual record searches. IBM's president, Thomas J. Watson, was personally involved in overseeing DEHOMAG's expansion during this period. Between 1933 and 1939, Watson traveled to Berlin at minimum twice per year. Germany became the largest IBM market outside the United States. By the late 1930s, DEHOMAG's German facilities were producing approximately 1.2 billion punch cards annually, a scale of production that served no other purpose than the continuous expansion of the Nazi administrative apparatus.
The Nazi state's use of IBM technology was not limited to a single census. It expanded continuously, encompassing an ever-widening set of administrative operations, each dependent on the same underlying infrastructure of punched cards and tabulating machines. We can examine this in 4 distinct operational domains. Population identification. The initial and most fundamental use was the identification of Jewish individuals across occupied Europe. In each newly occupied territory, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, the Nazi administration conducted rapid censuses using IBM systems configured to the same racial classification logic applied in Germany. The results were punched card databases that gave the regime a detailed, searchable map of the Jewish population in each region. How many people, where they lived, their ages, and their occupations. This information was the prerequisite for every subsequent phase of persecution. Asset seizure and economic exclusion. Following identification, the regime moved to strip Jewish citizens of their property. IBM systems were used to cross-reference population records with property, business registration, and financial records, producing comprehensive inventories of Jewish-owned assets. The tabulating machines could sort by asset type, value, location, and owner simultaneously, producing targeted lists for confiscation orders far faster than any manual administrative process could have achieved.
Deportation logistics. The transport of hundreds of thousands of people to concentration camps across a continent at war required coordination of extraordinary complexity. IBM systems were used to manage railway scheduling, cross-referencing available rolling stock, track capacity, military freight requirements, and deportation quotas across dozens of rail lines simultaneously. The same tabulating logic that had once optimized freight movement was now applied to the movement of human beings to their deaths. Historians note that the deportation trains ran with a reliability that civilian passenger services could not match during the same period. Concentration camp administration. Within the camps themselves, IBM tabulating machines managed prisoner registries. Each prisoner was assigned a number. The number tattooed on the forearm at Auschwitz was in effect a punch card index key. The cards for each prisoner encoded physical description, work assignment, health status, disciplinary record, and, upon death, cause. Processing of incoming transports, assignment of labor details, and the statistical accounting of mortality were all managed through the Hollerith system. Documents recovered after the war bear the stamp Hollerith Erfest, recorded by Hollerith, across prisoner registration forms from multiple camps. What distinguished IBM's contribution was not merely that the technology existed, but that it was actively customized for each application. The punch card layouts used in the camps were not standard configurations. They were purpose-designed for the specific administrative requirements of each facility. IBM's technicians provided ongoing support, maintenance, and card supply throughout the period of the camp's operation. The system was not simply adopted, it was continuously developed and refined in service of its application.
Any rigorous examination of this subject must acknowledge the limits and the contested dimensions of the historical record. IBM's official position, stated following the publication of Black's book in 2001, was that the corporation lost effective control of DEHOMAG after Germany's declaration of war against the United States in December 1941, and that it possessed no surviving documentation from the period that would allow it to respond substantively to Black's claims. Some historians have questioned whether Black's thesis overstates IBM's causal role. The argument runs as follows. Punch card tabulation was a widely understood technology by the 1930s. German engineers were capable of replicating or independently developing it, and the ultimate cause of the Holocaust was political and ideological, not technological. To attribute the scale of the genocide to a data processing system, this critique holds, risks obscuring the human agency of those who designed and implemented it. These are legitimate scholarly qualifications. They do not, however, alter the documented facts. IBM's equipment was present and operational throughout the Nazi administrative system. IBM's cards were the exclusive supply source for that equipment. IBM's technicians maintained it, and IBM's revenues reflected its continued commercial relationship with the regime until the point of American entry into the war, and through neutral intermediaries, possibly beyond it.
The IBM case is significant not merely as a corporate history, but as a structural analysis of the relationship between data technology and the exercise of state power. The punch card system did not create the conditions for the Holocaust. It did not generate the ideology, the political will, or the institutional apparatus of the Third Reich. What it did was remove the informational bottleneck that might otherwise have constrained the regime's capacity to act on that ideology at scale. This distinction is technically precise and morally important. A state that wishes to persecute a minority population must first answer a series of logistical questions. Who are they? Where are they? What do they own? How do we move them? How do we account for them? Before IBM's technology, answering those questions at a national or continental scale required years of manual labor, was prone to error, and produced results that quickly became obsolete. With it, the same questions could be answered in weeks with high precision at any geographic scale and updated continuously. In that sense, the Holocaust represents the first large-scale deployment of automated data processing in the service of genocide. It was not the last time that the intersection of state power and information technology would produce catastrophic results. And as the capacity of such systems has grown, from punch cards to relational databases to machine learning systems capable of identifying individuals from biometric data at population scale, the structural question raised by the IBM case has only become more urgent.
In the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., there is an IBM Holorith tabulating machine on permanent display. It stands as a reminder that the instruments of modern administration, the systems we build to organize populations, to manage resources, to count and classify, are not neutral. Their neutrality depends entirely on the purposes to which they are directed and the willingness of those who supply them to ask that question before the contract is signed. The cards that fed through IBM's machines in the 1930s and 1940s were made of paper. The information they carried was elementary by contemporary standards. 80 columns, 12 rows, a finite set of categorical values. Yet in the hands of a regime committed to systematic murder, that elementary technology was sufficient to contribute to the deaths of millions. That is the history. The lesson it contains is addressed not to the past, but to the present.